forged on the gridiron in September. Perfected in the magic of March.
Again, rebounded by Indiana. The game is over.
For the fans who love the crunch of the pads, prefer a dunk,
Oh, he just shook the gravity.
and expect nothing but the best. It's Bigger Ten. Here's Steve Dace.
And welcome to this week's episode of Bigger Ten. I am Steve Dace. He is the co-host who will never, ever be a partner, the one and only Aaron McIntyre. And to quote the great prophet Lee Corso, the games in November are the ones you remember. It is November. It is stretch drive time now for the Big Ten and college football in general. Maybe you could argue the best sports month of the year. College basketball starts next week. NFL is now into high gear. We still got the World Series going on. So we've got a ton to get to this week here on Bigger Ten. Aaron, you ready to go?
The games in November are the ones you remember, and I probably should not say this out loud because it's going to expose me as probably not being as well informed as I should be doing a show like this, but I'm not going to remember about 3/4 of them because we're traveling for the next 3 Saturdays, and I won't be able to watch a single snap of football on Saturdays.
Holy
for
cow.
the next 3 weeks.
Who did you offend?
Here's the thing, Steve. People are too social these days. Just too social. People getting married, having birthday parties.
To quote the great prophet Greta Thunberg, how dare you?
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. So I hope you enjoy it for me an extra amount. At least we've got Maction.
I'm going to. Yes.
At least we've got Maction I can watch during the weeknights. But the next 3 Saturdays, going to be in the car all day this Saturday.
So here's what you got to do, brother. You get the Sirius XM app, College Football Tailgate. You run that Bluetooth through your car, your phone through your car.
Yeah.
So you're listening to that?
It's actually, I'm sorry, Friday's when we're driving. Saturday is a wedding. Okay. At least I'll be able to listen to NFL on Sunday.
No, you just listen on Saturday with an earbud. Just take it out if somebody needs you.
Actually, that's not too bad.
Yeah.
Do you think I could get away with that up on stage? I'm probably
when you're
going to
on stage, don't. But when you're not on stage,
okay.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to be carrying on stage anyway. So if I'm going to be carrying a weapon on stage with me and nobody's going to be able to tell, I was wondering if I could have an AirPod in.
One of your predecessors, the great Corey Kuhn, I got to figure out what happened to him. One of my first sports talk radio producers, he got married the Saturday of the Michigan State game and asked me to be in his wedding party.
Why?
So I couldn't say no, right? But this was 2003. Yeah, because this was the game Chris Perry ran the ball like 50 times against Sparty. And this is before, digital, Wi-Fi, all that stuff was all the rage. I've still got one of those pocket TVs with the antenna on it, battery powered, you know what I'm talking
nice.
about?
Yeah.
And I was out there, in between pictures, everything, I was watching it the whole time.
Man.
Anytime I wasn't needed on camera or on stage, I'm watching the game on the pocket phone.
When I was a kid,
TV.
and Sears, I believe, and maybe Target as well, still had their Christmas catalogs. Man,
yeah.
I wanted one of those portable TVs so bad. Never going to happen. Never going to allow that to happen. My parents were never going to. But yeah, that's cool stuff. Hey, before we get into the Bigger Five, should we talk what happened this week with my program just a little bit?
Yeah, because that news came out before or after we did the rundown. So that's a great point of order. Let's begin with the news that the athletic director, and the interim one at that, by the way, the interim athletic director at Iowa announces that Brian Ferentz's contract will not be renewed after the season. Kirk Ferentz has asked for his thoughts. He calls it a, quote, violation of protocol. And I don't know that we brought this up on the air, but I've told you off the air, this reminded me a lot of Mark Richt at the end with Miami, where his son was an assistant and the school wanted him to fire him and he quit rather than fire his own son. He said, hey man, I've made my money. I've done all that at the end of my career. I'm not firing my own kid, And so you almost are starting to wonder, is this maybe the end of the Ferentz era in Iowa in total? Not just the Brian Ferentz era, but what say you?
So I'm ambivalent to this news for this reason. When this was rumored on, I believe it was Monday morning, the rumor was that Brian Ferentz was resigning. which got me thinking a little bit, hey, this might actually be good news because that might get your dad's attention. That might realize, and that would say Brian just loves his dad a lot and is a classy person. And I'm not saying that he's not for not resigning. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I thought there's a difference between being removed and resigning. I think this allows Kirk Ferentz, I think this allows him the one last opportunity, if he wants it, to really change the way he does things. But I'm not sure if he really wants to take that. I mean, it seems like this would be as good of a time as any. Now, if they go out and there and they lose the rest of their games, I don't know if he wants to go out like that. But if they go out there and have another 9-win season, I can see him saying, that's the end of the road for me at Iowa. And, good luck to whoever fills those shoes. But at this point, I'm pretty ambivalent to this news, unless it means once and for all, hey, we're just going to delegate the offense. They're going to have their own little fiefdom. I'm still going to be the head honcho calling the big shots and the big games. But this is not entirely, I don't think, unexpected. You can see this one to two ways, or maybe both things can be true at the same time. It took an incredible amount of intestinal fortitude for Beth Getz, being the interim AD, to make this call in the middle of the season and violate protocol, as Kirk Ferentz says. At the same time, I'm not really sure. You brought this up when I talked to you about this off the air. How do you motivate and keep guys accountable when they know you're going to be gone?
Yeah.
But at the same time as well, I guess this is the third thing that's simultaneously true. I'm not sure how much worse it could get, so what does it matter? So I don't know. A lot will be answered this offseason.
I think one answer we have is who the next Iowa athletic director is going to be.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
I cannot possibly imagine that an interim AD would be allowed to come off the top rope against a guy who's been coaching since the end of the 20th century, unless she was going to become the full-time AD.
Yep.
Fair?
Yep.
Yeah.
I honestly don't, prior to this, I don't know why she hadn't taken the interim tag off, but yeah, I mean, she is the athletic director going forward.
All right. Let's get to it. The Big Five on Bigger Ten. Let's begin with the first rendition of the college football playoff rankings. And the Big Ten is rated number 1 vis-a-vis Ohio State. Georgia is number 2, the two-time defending national champions. Michigan is number 3. Florida State is number 4. So if the season ended today, those would be your playoff teams. You'll notice future Big Ten teams are rated number 5 and number 6, and also rated number 19 and 20. But, understand, just like people are pointing out, well, Oklahoma and Texas, this would give the SEC even more teams. Understand, when all these teams all join the same 2 leagues next year and play each other, it's probably not how it's going to break down.
Yep.
These teams are going to have more L's, okay? But for now, it does speak to what the overall depth of the Big Ten and the SEC would be. If this were next year, you'd be looking at a situation where, 11 of the top 12 teams, Aaron, and we're talking about a 12-team playoff, of course. So, but you got to throw in a group of 5 team as well. But 11 of the top 12 teams, 12 of the top 14 teams would be from the Big Ten or the SEC.
Yep, that's going to be pretty much. I don't. There will be more pandemonium going forward, but I mean they are cementing themselves as the premier conferences. I really don't have any major bones to pick. I don't like it's
minor.
It's the initial one.
But Oklahoma beat Texas on the field. To me, they ought to be ranked ahead of them. But
I see Washington
get it.
ahead of Oregon in the same vein. So I really don't have any major beefs. The things that stick out: Georgia, Michigan, Air Force. Going through these, those are the teams that are ranked that really haven't played anybody. But the eye test, whatever you want to call it, I don't have any major beefs with this initial poll.
It's kind of unfair, I think, to compare Air Force to Georgia and Michigan. Air Force has only played one team that even has a winning record right now. So that being said, they do have the most underrated uniforms in college football. All right, let's get to issue number 2. This is the most Big Ten West season that has ever Big Ten Wested in the history of the Big Ten West. We are heading into November, and essentially everybody but Illinois is in it. Illinois and Purdue, I'm sorry. The 2 teams that, by the way, played for the Big Ten West last year, Illinois and Purdue, are the only 2 teams in the division. The other 5 are in it, including Northwestern. We'll talk about them in a moment. But a Minnesota team we all watch get 50-pointed and mercy ruled basically in their own stadium on primetime TV 3 weeks ago. They're right now in the driver's seat, but lots of teams right now are in the driver's seat. Wisconsin has already lost Tanner Mordecai. Looks like Braylon Allen is hurt. We haven't gotten an update, but he didn't return against Ohio State. So you got to think that, there's something going on there. Iowa is down to its second string quarterback in Deacon Hill, who of course has looked pretty underwhelming. Northwestern's been playing with its second string quarterback for the last few weeks. Minnesota probably doesn't even want to know who its second string quarterback is. It finally had a game this week, Aaron. This week was the first time all year it threw for 200 yards in a game, was this past week for Minnesota. Nebraska's on its second string quarterback. It's also like on its third string offensive line and third string wide receivers. And it just had its first undefeated October since 2001. This stuff is nuts. And it's just like the Big Ten West is like, you know what, on the way out, we're letting it all the first coming out, all the first flying. We're going all the way. We're going as deep as it gets with Big Ten West. I don't know what you call this. Folklore? Legendary status? This is the most Big Ten West thing of all time.
Oh, good grief. I watched a lot of college football last Saturday because it's the last Saturday until the final Saturday of the year that I was going to be able to do so. And I watched across the spectrum of the sport. I watched a lot of gross football on Saturday. And the grossest of all was in the West, the Big Ten West. And nowhere was that more emblematic than when Nebraska was playing Purdue and they were up by a margin they thought was comfortable. So I believe they put Jeff Sims back in at quarterback because he's their backup now. I believe. I could have gotten the numbers confused. And what does he do? He immediately gives up a scoop and score for 6 points, gets Purdue back in the game. Just a lot of gross football last weekend. And this division, it's like the Spider-Man meme pointing at each other,
yes.
Except there's 5. They're all just pointing at each other. No, you take it. No, you take it. You take it. You take it. I don't know. That was... Minnesota is in the driver's seat, and, the controversial ending to the Iowa game notwithstanding, they really did what they needed to do against Michigan State, so I'd say they're the favorites. I see a lot of people still saying Iowa. No, you just cannot bank on that. Now, it may shake out that way. There may be enough turnovers that the Iowa defense can produce, but, man, they are not nowhere. Nobody is close to a shoo-in, but, yeah, Minnesota's got to be the favorites at this point.
Minnesota, by the way, has to end the season with Ohio State and Wisconsin. So
yeah, well, maybe not.
Yeah. And they've got Illinois this weekend, but if you know the history of that series, PJ Fleck has not had a lot of success against Illinois. All right, let's stay in the West for our next topic, though. Let's get an early read on Coach of the Year. And in my view, it's got to be right now either Matt Rule or David Braun. If you'd have known going into the year the amount of injuries Nebraska was going to have to overcome, and yet they're coming off their first undefeated October since 2001. Keep in mind, this is a once proud, all-time proud program in this sport that hasn't even been to a bowl game since 2016. Barack Obama was still president the last time Nebraska played a postseason game. But then you look at, so that would seem to kind of be a shoo-in, right? But man, I got to tell you, if David Braun, if Northwestern wins 2 more games and gets to a bowl, brother, this might be the greatest coaching job in Big Ten history. Straight up. Yep. I'm not even lying. You're talking about a guy that has no head coaching experience. He took over an absolute dumpster fire of with a hazing scandal of the most beloved alumni that implicated the most beloved alumni in the history of the university. And an ongoing legal battle where that's concerned. Guys hopping in the transfer portal. They already were picked consensus last in the league across the board. Everybody already understands this is the least talented roster in the conference. I just said they had to play their backup quarterback the last few weeks, and yet they're sitting here at 4-4. And I was making like Denny Green, Francis P. era Northwestern comparisons at the start of the year. For them to even be in this position is absolutely incredible. They've got to give him that job, in my opinion. I mean, with what he has done and demonstrated, the way he's embraced it. Yes, they got a nice win over Maryland at home and a big upset by point spread. It's the biggest upset in the Big Ten in a conference game so far this year. Aaron, less than 20,000 fans came to that game.
Yeah.
There were less than 20,000 fans there, so it wasn't like it was rocking and rolling there in the Dave Schnurr days, okay? The job he has done is phenomenal. And when you look at that schedule, I mean, I could see them getting 2 more wins. I mean, would it shock you if they beat Iowa 10-9 at Wrigley Field on Saturday? Nope. They get Illinois at the end of the year. I could see them getting 2 more wins. So in my opinion, I think these 2 guys are right now your front runners for Coach of the Year. You can disagree with that. Or if you agree, which one would you go with?
So these were the 2 guys during Big Ten media days that they stood out the most to me and impressed me the most of at least the newcomers, Matt Rule and David Brown. And I would say, even if Nebraska comes out with a better record, given the situation at Northwestern, if Northwestern makes a bowl game, I'd give it to Brown because you just cannot. That is coaching. That's coaching right there. To get guys to believe that it is us against the world and we're not helpless, that's all coaching and culture right there. And that doesn't take anything away from what Matt Rule has done, but I think you would have to give it to David Brown because that is not an easy place to coach, not an easy place to play, or at least not an easy place to get fans to, as you just pointed out. And to do what they did to Maryland, I watched most of that game. Northwestern was pretty much in control for that entire thing, other than a few spurts here and there. And I think they were 17-point underdogs going into that game, or 14-point underdogs going into that game. Really, really impressive stuff from him. And yeah, I mean, if they beat Iowa this weekend, I think they can be expected to make it to a bowl game. So I'd go with the latter, but I do agree these are the front runners at this point.
Let's switch gears, talk a little hoops since basketball starts up here next week. And wondering if this was kind of discussed to be a one-off. There were because of the tragedy in Maui, there have been a series of exhibitions, including Illinois beating preseason number 1 ranked Kansas in Champaign last week. So there's been lots of discussions about whether this is something that we're going to see moving forward in the future. These kinds of charity exhibitions with top teams playing one another. What do you think? Is this something that we're going to see more of moving on?
It's for charity. It's not just for eyeballs.
Yeah.
Oh, well, then in that case, yeah, sure. Do a few of these high-profile charity exhibition games. Yeah, sure. There's nothing wrong with that. Put them on TV. I think everybody wins. If we're talking about just doing this for eyeballs, for television ratings, I don't give a crap about that. I really don't. We have enough. What are they called? We just have enough preseason tournaments anyway. Early season, non-exempt.
So these matchups
aren't
there's not as much mystery like there is in football, for example.
Exactly. So I think, I love. I mean, the Bahamas, the one that they do at the Bahamas. I can't remember what they call that, where they literally play in a ballroom. Mm-hmm. That's fun. I love that. I love watching that on television. Iowa was in that 5-6 years ago. A lot of fun to watch. I love those early seseason tournaments.
That's
don't
the Battle for
Atlantis
you're talking about.
Yes, thank you. So, yeah, if this is for charity, do 2 or 3 of these a year with high-profile matchups, and I think everybody wins. If it's just for eyeballs, no, don't do that.
Well, the Big Ten was involved in 2 of these. That's obviously a confidence booster for Illinois to beat preseason number 1 Kansas. Michigan State was in it against Tennessee. Tennessee was without its starting backcourt and still beat Michigan State, albeit by 1 point. So, who knows what, if any, these games mean. I would imagine if Michigan State and Tennessee played in the regular season, given the way those 2 teams play defense, it wouldn't be 89-88, right? So you kind of wonder if maybe the players were treating it a little bit like an exhibition, if you know what I mean. Well, let's go to Kenpom. And remember, Ken Pomeroy's analytics are done with determining or figuring out future events. They're a projection-based algorithm. All right. So this isn't just what Kenpom thinks about the teams going into the season, but it's really where Kenpom thinks the teams will finish based on what his algorithm thinks about them heading into the season. So here are Kenpom's rankings of the Big Ten starting, or with the season starting next week. Purdue is number 1 overall in the country. Michigan State, which is top 5 or 10 in all the preseason polls, is 13th in Kenpom. Illinois is 19th. We just mentioned they beat Kansas, number 1 Kansas in that exhibition. Wisconsin, who's bringing everybody back, is number 20. Maryland is 22. Ohio State, who was last year, along with Michigan, the big disappointments in the league, they're 35th. Northwestern, which made the tournament again last year as a surprise, is number 40. Michigan, most of the polls have Michigan 10th, 11th, 12th in the Big Ten. Pomeroy is projecting Michigan to finish 44th. So he's basically saying this is like an NCAA tournament caliber team, a team that would either be on the bubble or, vying to be one of the last four in with a bye. Indiana is at 49th, so he's way lower on Indiana. His metric is than a lot of the preseason publications are. Iowa is 50th. Nebraska at 58th is the highest I can remember them heading into a year in a long time. Rutgers is at 59th. Penn State. So there you can see 12 out of the top 60 teams in the Big Ten, man. Whew. Going to be a lot of L's in conference play. Penn State 85, Minnesota 112th. And then on the right, here are the teams we're adding next year. If this were, again, just like we said, the playoff rankings, Aaron, if this were next year, 15 of the top 60 teams in Ken Pomeroy's preseason projection would be Big Ten teams. So your thoughts on where Kenpom assesses the Big Ten basketball programs heading into the year? He's higher on Michigan than the market, lower on Indiana than the market. Those are the two things that are different from a lot of the preseason analysis you're seeing out there.
Yeah, I can't remember in years past where the Big Ten has shaken up at the beginning of Kenpom's rankings. But to me, this seems like kind of a departure from what we're used to. Now, it's still, as you said, it's still relatively impressive given the total number of teams in this sport at this level. But still, this seems like a little bit of a departure from what we're used to.
You mean that there's only one top 10 team? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I'm used to seeing more in the top 20, top 15.
Yep.
And there's only a couple there.
Yep.
But you're right. The rest of the schedule for the Big Ten, that's just going to be
night in and night out. It's a coin flip, man.
Exactly. So from that aspect, this is going to be a hard season to get a handle on for a lot of these teams. But then once you factor in, like you said, USC, UCLA, and even Oregon coming into the league next season, it's just going to be pandemonium. And this is not Big Ten related. Do you have any credence? Do you give any credence to this talk that Gonzaga could join the Big 12 in basketball only?
I do. I think Yormark has been very creative. And I think that he recognizes they're giving out $1 billion a year, for as part of that disbursement for the NCAA tournament to all the schools.
Yeah.
And that's a large chunk of money, man. And it's not, what football, it's a drop in the bucket compared to what football is paying out, which is several billion. But that's still a not insignificant amount of money. If you can produce a league where your teams are dominating who's in the Final 16, Final 8, get a Final 4 team in every single year, that's a butt ton of revenue, brother. So, yeah, I could totally see it. You bet. All right, we'll come back and we'll play Would You Rather in a moment. All right, Aaron, let's play Would You Rather. This one is for you. Would you rather bet Michigan, Georgia, Ohio State to win the national championship or the field if that prop bet was offered to you?
I would rather bet Michigan, Georgia, Ohio State. It's either going to be Michigan or Georgia, in my opinion. That's not to take anything away from Ohio State, who I believe has earned their number one ranking. They're the only team that's had two tests.
I agree.
And passed them both.
Yeah.
Not to take anything away from them at all. But I think it's going to be either Michigan or Georgia. So I don't think the field really has much of a shot in the dark to beat any of these three teams, especially Michigan or Georgia.
Keep in mind, Georgia's going for 3 undisputed national championships in a row.
Hard to do.
Only been done one time in the AP poll era. Benny Bierman's Minnesota Gophers nearly 100 years ago, 1930s. Only time it's ever happened.
This one's for you. Would you rather be USC or UCLA right now, knowing what's coming next year? Kind of having the same types of seasons.
UCLA. I think both in terms of football and basketball, they're more prepared for how we play here. Chip Kelly has always been very new age in his tactics, but when you stop and you look at his offense, it really is just good old-fashioned running the foot. It's basically the veer and the wishbone out of a shotgun and different formations. So they're already playing a more physical brand of football than Lincoln Riley plays at USC. And certainly you look at the basketball program there with Mick Cronin. Absolutely, brother. They're ready to play 20 games in the Big Ten, man. Okay. So I think UCLA for football and men's basketball, the two sports that matter the most, I think physically they're certainly of the two programs more prepared for what awaits them here next year. Aaron, for you, would you rather bet Iowa Northwestern over its original total of 29.5 or Rutgers money line over Ohio State?
This isn't a stupid proposition at all. You're not being facetious. This is not haha funny. I would still go over 29.5. Just because Deacon Hill's ball security has been an issue.
It could be a fumble, scoop and score, yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
So I think that's an easier number to get to rather than Rutgers money line over Ohio State. But this is not out of the realm. I mean, this is not a foolish statement at all. Finally, for you, would you rather bet Michigan minus 32 or a fictitious Iowa alternate total versus Northwestern of under 21.5?
I could see the Purdue game going a lot like Michigan's non-conference games where they're just in total control, but everybody plays. And so maybe it's like 35-7, okay? 30-3, something like, what you saw in the non-conference. And I could absolutely see 12-10, 10-9. Keep in mind, the game is at Wrigley. You got these abnormal dimensions, wind. What are the odds of that alternate total? What kind of odds am I getting?
I can see if it's real or not.
Because if I'm getting plus odds, if you give me like a plus 140, plus 150 on that.
Let me look this up real quick. So we've got game lines, alternate total. It goes down to 26, and under 26 is plus 183. So I'm guessing it would be like
plus 200 something?
Yeah.
Oh, I'd absolutely take that bet. Absolutely. I'd much rather be sitting on a plus 200 something Iowa Northwestern under 21.5 than sweating out whether
minus 32.
Yeah, whether Purdue scores against Michigan's fifth string, in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's an interesting prop though, for sure. All right, we'll come back, wrap things up here in a moment. This week's Twitter poll, we asked you, who has a better case to be number one in the first college football playoff rankings? 47% of you said Michigan. 37% of you said the team that was rated number one, the Ohio State Buckeyes. 17% said somebody else, so like a Georgia, Washington, Florida State, etc. Your thoughts on these results, Aaron?
I don't, I would have voted Ohio State, but I mean, you can make a case for Michigan or someone else pretty easily. Here's the thing, though. When you have a resume, that needs to be the first thing on your rubric and weighted towards that. So that's why I think Ohio State is fair to be number one. They're the only team in the country that's had two major tests and passed both of them. When it comes to Michigan, though, now, if they did not have that, if Notre Dame, you have the big names, but, Notre Dame's not very good, or Penn State wasn't very good, or had a loss coming into Ohio State, then you go off of eye test and who looks the best. And then you could make the case for Michigan. But we do have resumes now, and Ohio State, I believe, is the only team in the country that has passed all the tests that's been given to them. So I don't have really a problem with the proportionality of this poll. I just would have had maybe Ohio State and Michigan flipped. But there's good arguments either way.
Agreed. Yeah. That brings us to our feedback of the week. Senor Raul T-Bone Celebergo would like to know what has happened to Maryland. They were looking at being number 4 in the Big Ten. Now they'll be lucky to be bowl eligible. We asked a month ago on this show if Maryland would win the Big Ten West. I think Maryland has seen enough of the Big Ten West. Okay, yeah. I think Maryland's had enough of the Big Ten West. And you look at their schedule the rest of the year, brother. Penn State this week. They still play Michigan. They still play Rutgers, best Rutgers team in a decade. They still play Nebraska.
Don't we do this every year with Maryland? We do this every year. They get off through a hot start. They look good against a big team, but then falter. And then that one loss becomes 2, becomes 3, and then they're back to, oh, no, we are Maryland again. We have this conversation like every season. I don't know why we keep falling. I'm including myself in that as well, because I agreed if they were in the West, and maybe if they were in the West, that would have been true.
Yeah.
But they just look discombobulated. And going into a sleepy Northwestern will do that to teams, even some good teams. But good grief, they have let that Ohio State loss really beat them, I think, 2-3 times now.
Agreed. All right, that'll do it for this week's episode. We are back at it again next week. Until then, don't forget to like, rate, subscribe, 5-star review, share, follow if you're on iTunes. So whether you're listening on iTunes, watching right here on YouTube, we'd love it if you did those things. It would help us to find more Big Ten fans just like you. And also don't forget to follow us on Twitter in between episodes, especially on game day, at Bigger10 on Twitter, at Bigger10 there. For Aaron McIntyre, I'm Steve Deace. We'll see you next week right here on Bigger 10.